Christmas time. That wonderful time of year, right? When everything just sparkles with lights and smells like pine needles and gingerbread. But underneath all that festive fun, Christmas is actually rooted in a pretty mind-blowing story.
It is.
The arrival of God on earth. I mean, seriously, God taking on human form.
It's incredible.
That's a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal.
And today, we're going to go on a deep dive.
Yeah.
To uncover some of that deeper meaning behind this incredible story.
That's right. And we're diving into a fascinating sermon based on Philippians 2:5-11, which takes a really unique look at the why behind Christ's incarnation from the perspective of the Apostle Paul.
So we're not just rehashing the same old nativity scene.
Not at all. Think of it as going behind the scenes to explore the divine motivations and implications.
Yeah.
The things that led to the moment that God actually entered the world.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we even begin to unpack something this massive?
Well, the sermon breaks it down into 5 key steps that detail Jesus' journey to Bethlehem. It's like a roadmap of sorts, guiding us through the incredible events that lead up to his birth.
5 steps to becoming human. That's a journey I'm definitely ready to explore. What's step 1?
Step 1 is abandoning a sovereign position. And this is where we confront the enormity of what Christ did. Before coming to earth, Jesus eternally existed as God, possessing all his attributes. Imagine having limitless power, knowledge, and being in perfect unity with God the Father.
Yeah, that's a level of existence I can barely wrap my head around. So he just gave all that up to be born in a stable.
It's even more radical than that. The sermon uses the word emptied. He willingly set aside the privileges of his divine glory, though he didn't lose his divinity.
Right.
The sermon gives specific examples of what this emptying entailed, like giving up his heavenly riches, the honor that's due to him, even his independent will.
Hold on, I get giving up the riches and a throne, but
Right.
his will. Can you unpack that a bit more?
Think of it this way. Imagine a powerful CEO who gives up their fortune and status to live among the homeless, working side by side with them to understand their struggles. That's the kind of radical humility Jesus embraced. He chose to submit to God, the Father's plan,
Wow.
even though it ultimately led him to the cross.
That's a level of sacrifice I never considered. It really reframes the whole King of Kings title we associate with Jesus, doesn't it?
It does. And that leads us to step 2, accepting a slave's place. Jesus didn't just come down to earth. He took on the lowest position, becoming a servant, fully submitting to God's will.
So he went from the ultimate authority to a position of servitude. That's a mind-blowing shift.
It is. And the sermon connects this back to the Old Testament prophets,
Okay.
who foretold a Messiah who would not come in power and glory,
Right.
but in humility, taking on the sins of the people. This concept of a suffering servant was woven into the fabric of Jewish history long before Jesus' birth.
So it wasn't a random act. It was part of a larger divine plan.
That's right.
It makes you wonder what it would take for any of us to make that kind of sacrifice.
Absolutely. And that brings us to step 3, which dives into the mystery of the incarnation. That is, God taking on human flesh.
So we're getting into the whole Jesus being both God and human thing, right?
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean in practical terms?
It means Jesus became fully human, not just in essence, but in experience. He lived a completely normal human life, working as a carpenter, feeling hunger, thirst,
Right.
even anger and grief. There's a line from the sermon I find striking. Nobody knew that he was God by looking at him,
Wow.
blended in, experiencing the full range of human emotions.
That makes me think about how we often put Jesus on a pedestal, almost separating him from our everyday struggles, but you're saying he was right there with us feeling all the same things.
Exactly, and this makes his sacrifice all the more profound. He didn't just experience life from afar, he immersed himself in it,
Right?
making him completely relatable and demonstrating the depth of his love for humanity.
Okay, that's a pretty powerful image to contemplate. So he empties himself, becomes a servant, takes on our humanity. Where does the journey go from there? What's step 4?
Step 4 is where things get intense. It's called adopting a selfless posture, and it culminates in Jesus' death on the cross. The sermon doesn't shy away from the brutal reality of his suffering, emphasizing the magnitude of bearing the weight of humanity's sins.
I mean, it's one thing to read about the crucifixion in a history book. It's another to truly grasp the agony he endured, both physically and emotionally. That level of selflessness is hard to comprehend.
And the sermon pushes us to go beyond a surface-level understanding. The speaker uses powerful quotes from theologians like Augustine to help us grasp the sheer immensity of what Christ endured for us. It's not simply a historical event.
Right.
It's a personal sacrifice made out of love.
I have to admit, after hearing all of this, those casual Merry Christmas greetings feel a bit trivial, like we're celebrating the birth of someone who willingly chose to suffer and die for us. That's a lot to unpack.
It is. And it speaks to how easily we can lose sight of the true meaning of Christmas. Amid all the holiday distractions, remembering Christ's sacrifice helps us refocus and appreciate the profound gift we've been given.
Okay, we've reached step 5, the final step in this incredible journey, ascending as Supreme Prince. So after the cross, what happens? Does the story just end there?
Not at all. This is where we see God's response to Jesus' sacrifice. He's resurrected, proving his victory over death, and then exalted to God's right hand. He's given the name above all names, Lord.
So it's not just about his death.
Right.
It's about what comes after. He's not defeated. He's ultimately triumphant. That's a powerful message of hope.
Exactly. And this is a crucial point. The sermon emphasizes that every knee will bow to Jesus, both in heaven and on earth. It underscores the importance of what the sermon calls confession. That is, acknowledging and submitting to Jesus as Lord for salvation. It's a powerful reminder of his ultimate authority and the impact of his sacrifice.
You know what strikes me is how this sermon is reframing the whole Christmas narrative. It's not just a feel-good story about a baby in a manger. It's about a deliberate, divine plan unfolding.
Right.
A story of sacrifice, humility, and ultimately victory.
That's right. And it's a story that goes far beyond a single day in December. It has profound implications for our lives. Every single day of the year.
Okay, now I'm really curious to hear how all this ancient theology connects to our lives in 2024. Give me the so what of all of this.
Well, let's continue our deep dive and see how this sermon challenges us to view Christmas and our lives in a whole new light.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. We've just walked through the 5 steps of Jesus' journey to Bethlehem, talk about a cosmic deep dive. But how does all this ancient theology connect to our lives today? In the midst of all the holiday shopping and carols, I need the so what of all this.
You're right, it's easy to get caught up in the holiday frenzy and lose sight of the deeper meaning. And that's where this sermon gets really interesting. It uses a surprising example to highlight how we often miss the mark when it comes to Christmas.
Say?
Santa Claus.
Wait, Santa. What does jolly old Saint Nick have to do with the incarnation of God?
Well, think about it. Christmas is supposed to be about the birth of Jesus.
Right.
But often Santa seems to steal the show.
Yeah.
It's all about who's been naughty or nice.
Yeah.
Presents under the tree. And the magic of Christmas Eve.
Yeah, you're right. As a kid, I was way more excited about Santa than I was about baby Jesus. But what's the sermon's point about all of this?
It's not about bashing Santa or banning presents. The sermon uses Santa as a symbol of how easily we can get distracted by the superficial aspects of Christmas.
Right.
And miss the profound spiritual truth at its core. It even quotes an Episcopalian leader who literally said that Santa Claus embodies the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Whoa, hold on. Someone actually said that Santa is God? That's wild.
It's an extreme example, but it highlights a real tendency we all have. When we prioritize the commercialization and cultural traditions of Christmas, we risk losing sight of the transformative message of God becoming man.
So it's not about boycotting the mall or canceling Santa. It's about what exactly?
It's about putting things in perspective, recognizing that while gift-giving and festive cheer could be part of the celebration, they shouldn't overshadow the heart of the matter. It's like putting a beautiful frame around a masterpiece. The frame enhances the art, but it's not the main attraction.
I'm starting to see Christmas through new eyes here. It's like I've been so focused on the wrapping paper that I've missed the actual gift. But if we're supposed to move beyond the superficial, what does the sermon suggest we do?
The sermon brings us back to the core of Jesus' journey. Those 5 steps we talked about. Remember how he emptied himself and took on the role of a servant?
Right.
The sermon challenges us to follow his example, embracing humility and putting the needs of others before our own.
So Christmas becomes less about what I get, than more about what I give.
That's the idea. And giving doesn't have to be about material things. It can be our time, our compassion, our willingness to be present for those in need. It's about reflecting Christ's love in tangible ways.
You know, it's one thing to hear about Jesus' sacrifice in an abstract way, but thinking about him giving up his privileges to serve humanity, that's a pretty high bar to set for ourselves, isn't it?
It is. But the sermon doesn't frame it as a burden. It's more like an invitation to experience the joy and fulfillment that come from living a life of selfless love. It's about finding true meaning
Okay.
and aligning ourselves with Christ's example and serving others.
It reminds me of something I read recently about how true happiness comes from contributing to something bigger than yourself. Maybe that's what the spirit of Christmas is all about. It's not just a day on the calendar.
Right.
It's a way of life.
That's a great insight. The sermon talks about cultivating a posture of humility and service in our everyday lives. It's about making choices that reflect Christ's love, even in the smallest of interactions.
So it's not about grand gestures or heroic acts. It's about those everyday choices, the little things we do that can have a ripple effect.
Exactly. It's about seeing those ordinary moments
Right.
as opportunities to embody Christ's love. It's a subtle but powerful shift in perspective.
I have to say, this deep dive is more challenging than I expected. It's really pushing me to think differently about Christmas and, well, about how I live my life in general.
That's the beauty of engaging with these profound theological ideas.
Yeah.
It's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about transformation. The sermon invites us to let the truth of Christ's incarnation shape our hearts and our actions.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired, but also a bit overwhelmed. Where do I even begin to put all this into practice?
The sermon offers a simple yet profound starting point. Confession. Remember how we talked about confessing Jesus as Lord?
Right.
This isn't just about reciting words.
Right.
It's about a deep surrender, allowing God to guide our steps as we seek to live lives of service and love.
So it's about aligning my actions with my beliefs, putting my faith into practice.
Exactly. The sermon emphasizes that true confession leads to transformation. It's about making a conscious choice to follow Jesus' example.
Right.
Even when it's difficult.
Yeah.
Even when it goes against the grain of our culture.
You know, it seems like the sermon is pointing us toward a completely different way of celebrating Christmas.
Yeah.
And even living our lives. It's about service.
Yes.
Humility,
Yeah.
love.
Yes.
Those seem to be the core values it's emphasizing.
You're picking up on the key takeaways. The sermon is ultimately a call to action,
Okay.
an invitation to embody these values, not just during the holidays,
Right.
but throughout the year. It's a reminder that the true spirit of Christmas is found in reflecting Christ's love in the world.
This deep dive has definitely added some new layers to my understanding of Christmas. It's gone from a one-dimensional holiday to a multifaceted experience with so much more to explore beneath the surface.
And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, the sermon has one final, powerful message to deliver. It connects the theology of Christmas with the promise of eternity, inviting us to consider the ultimate implications of our response to Christ's sacrifice.
Okay, we've explored the 5 steps of Jesus' journey to Bethlehem. We've talked about Santa Claus and the commercialization of Christmas, and now I'm ready for the grand finale. What's this final powerful message? The one that connects Christmas with eternity.
This is where the rubber meets the road, where the sermon challenges us to confront the ultimate implications of Christ's coming. You know, it's not just a feel-good story or a set of values to emulate. It's about a choice that has eternal consequences.
Okay, now we're getting serious. We're talking heaven and hell here, right?
The sermon doesn't shy away from the stark reality of those two destinations.
Yeah.
It uses powerful imagery, talking about those who will confess Jesus as Lord, either in heaven or in the fires of hell. It's a sobering reminder that our response to Christ's sacrifice really matters.
I have to say, that kind of language can feel a little intense, especially during the cheery Christmas season. It's not exactly your typical holiday message.
It's definitely not sugarcoating things. But the sermon isn't meant to scare us into belief. You know, it's meant to awaken us to the profound significance of the choice before us. It's a call to authentic faith, a confession that goes beyond mere words and transforms our lives.
So it's not enough to just put up a nativity scene and sing Silent Night. What does it actually mean to make that genuine confession?
Well, it's about a deep, heart-level surrender to Christ as Lord, allowing his teachings to shape our thoughts, our actions, and ultimately, our eternal destiny. It's about making a conscious choice to follow him, even when it's difficult, even when it goes against the grain of our culture.
So Christmas becomes more than just a celebration of Jesus' birth. It's also a reminder of the new life he offers us, both now and in eternity.
Exactly. The sermon emphasizes the incredible grace and hope offered through Christ's sacrifice. It's not about earning our way to heaven. It's about receiving the free gift of forgiveness and eternal life through faith in him. It's about stepping into a life filled with purpose and meaning, and ultimately a joy that transcends the ups and downs of this world.
Wow. After this deep dive, Christmas feels like a completely different holiday. We started with twinkling lights and Santa Claus, and now we're contemplating eternity. It's been a real journey.
And that's the beauty of it. The sermon invites us to engage with the Christmas story on a much deeper level, to move beyond the sentimental and embrace the transformative power of the gospel. It's about allowing the truth of Christ's incarnation to shape our hearts, our minds, and our lives.
I'm walking away from this conversation feeling challenged and inspired and honestly a bit overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what we've been discussing.
And that's okay. The sermon doesn't expect us to have it all figured out. It simply invites us to take that first step of faith, to confess Jesus as Lord and allow Him to guide us on the journey.
I'm so grateful for this deep dive. It's really given me a lot to think about as I head into the Christmas season.
And as we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a question to ponder. How does understanding the theological depth of Christ's incarnation change your personal view of Christmas? Let that question guide you as you experience the joy and wonder of celebrating the birth of our Savior.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the theology of Christmas.